Working on large projects can be challenging. Not only is there a risk if pricing isn't accurate, but everything is just bigger. And being a single man operation, well, working alone can lead to sketchy situations. More on that later. This project, though very large at 15 foot long and 10 foot high, it's quite simple in the arrangement. There will be a lower section of cabinets with doors and drawers for hidden storage, and 3 upper sections, 2 of which will be open shelves and the other center section for the TV. The countertop will be solid oak with matching oak shelves and a whitewash finish. The first thing is to break down all the plywood sheets. I used an online cut list optimizer tool to help lay out all the parts so that there's less waste in the end. As I work through the sheets, I cross out the panels that are completed on the printout. This makes the process so much smoother and much more organized. I like to break down the sheets using a track saw, leaving about 1/2 inch of extra material so I can do the final trim at the table saw. This way I know everything is perfectly square and straight. With the sheets cut down to size, I'll use the router table with an undersized router bit for all of the dados and grooves, which will help with the assembly process. I like to use a 1/4 inch bit for my back panels and a 3/4 inch for the dado and rabbets. Process isn't necessary, but it makes aligning the panels during assembly much easier since you have a place for each edge to sit in before adding screws to hold them together. Even with these joints, I still like to use a clamping square to make sure everything is perfect. Top section has shiplap backing panels, which is a little bit larger than the undersized bit. So it did take some elbow grease to get into place. If I did this over, I would have added a small brace towards the bottom of each section to keep the bottoms from kicking out. It took a bit of time, but eventually it locked into the groove. And once I got the carcasses built, I started milling out the face frame using poplar. To join the face frame together, I'm going to use lap joints, and that's going to give it plenty of strength for the install. I took the top rail and clamped it onto the cabinet, marked the center line where the stiles would cover the plywood edge of the cabinet, and used the stiles themselves to mark the exterior edges for me to create my lap joint. I was sent a really cool jig from Microjig, which I honestly think is a very ingenious design. It allows you to find the halfway point on any material so long that it fits under the gauge. It makes setting up the router for this cut super quick and accurate. They're not a sponsor, but I do have an Amazon link in the description if you do want to purchase one and support the channel. The great thing is I can set up the gauge on my trim router, then take it over to my router table to set up the height and cut out the joints for the stiles. The 2 pieces came together perfectly. I then take the entire face frame and test fit it onto the cabinet. I left the left and right side a little bit wider so I can scribe to fit when I'm ready to install. Now that the face frame's done, I can start working on the drawer and door fronts. I'll use the same setup gauge for the tongue and grooves. When using this bit, I suggest creating a small test piece before cutting the actual rail and stiles. This way, I know for sure that the fit is perfect. These doors will overlay or sit on top of the face frame by 3/4 inch. To measure these fronts, I simply added 1.5 inches to the overall length and height of the opening on the face frame. This will account for 3/4 inch overlap on the left and the right side. For the doors, I divided the dimension in half to give me 2 doors per opening. I'll also trim each door by 1/32 inch where the 2 doors meet. That way I'll have a 1/16 inch gap at the center. Once everything's glued and dried, I'll send it through my drum sander to help with the sanding process. The drawer boxes on these are pretty straightforward. I do suggest using pre-finished plywood if it's available at your lumberyard. It does cost a little bit extra, but the money spent is well worth it because you're going to save so much time trying to spray finish it later. I've also switched out from using side-mounted drawer slides to now under-mounted slides, which has been amazing. There's a lot of details when it comes to building cabinets and boxes, so if you're interested in that type of dedicated video, leave a comment down below. Once everything is done, I can start painting. I'm using the Fuji Minimite 4 with the PPS system from 3M, which has been a game changer when it comes to cleanup. The product is contained in a plastic cup, which can be stored for later use or toss away at the end of the project when it's done. All I have to do is break down the spray gun, clean the components. I'm using less product during the spray and also less product during the cleanup. I highly recommend it if you're spraying your own finish. For the wood countertop, I'm using Rubio Monocoat Cotton White to give the wood a whitewashed look. This is the look the client was going for, and I feel like it fits their home really well. This product is something I've been using for years, so you can check out my other builds I have on this channel for different results of the finish. It's easy to use, but with large panels like this, I suggest some kind of buffer to remove the product rather than manually buffing it out yourself. It makes the process go by much quicker. Of course, you can do it by hand, which is perfectly fine. You'll have to work in section depending on how large the project is, because the product itself has to be wiped off within 10 minutes. For my base cabinets, I like to create my own riser to set the cabinets on. You can create a toe kick out of the side panels, integrate it into the base cabinet, but I find that leveling out the bases can be tricky, especially when you have multiple base cabinet sections. This is why I like this method. I can level out the risers first and make sure that it's flat before setting the cabinets on top. If the base is flat, then the cabinets will be flat as well. The base is secured into the base plate of the wall, so I don't have to measure every 16-inch on center to find a stud. And then the cabinet is screwed into each other and then down into the base. Make sure to add screws where it won't be seen when the door and drawers are open. So that meant adding screws behind the face frame and only in the drawer sections. I forgot to record the face frame installation, but it was pretty straightforward. I just attached it with glue and nails. Once the countertop was in place, I installed the top section and had a close call along the way. Whew, that was definitely scary. There's a slight gap between the cabinet and the existing wall. You typically don't build cabinets flush with the wall because all walls are not perfectly straight. The gaps will accommodate any adjustments that is needed to keep the cabinet square. The gaps will then be covered by the face frame, so you won't even notice it. Before adding all the trims, I went ahead and installed the shelf so that they sit inside of the opening. The shelves themselves are hollow, so they slide into these rails that I secured into the cabinet. The doors are installed using hidden hinges, and I love using this Craig jig for this. Super easy to bore out these holes and make sure that it's in the right spot every single time. Once everything was installed, I went back and filled the nail holes with some wood filler, sanded everything down, and added the final coats of paint to the trim. And finally, we can install the door hardware, and this project is done. I keep telling myself to not take on large projects like these because I simply don't have the space for it. But for some reason, I really love them. I love the challenges and the rewards that come out of them in the end. Like all projects, breaking down the process into manageable parts is the way to go. As the saying goes, there's only one way to eat an elephant, one bite at a time. This has been Bao with Design Craft Workshop. See ya.